Basically, I was going to start with the bottom line question is, what do you need to do to get ready for the coming changes in Windows? The answer is nothing. Now, the kernel of this presentation was a discussion by veteran Microsoft journalists and authors Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley during their podcast of Windows Weekly. And they were discussing the announcement of the Edge browser giving up the Microsoft rendering engine for the Chromium engine and the ramifications of what that's going to mean, not only to browsing, but to Windows in general. With the opening of Microsoft's browser to all Chrome extensions, there will finally be a unification of extensions between the three major browsers, Chrome, Firefox, and Microsoft's Edge, which, as you don't know, is the successor to Internet Explorer. More on that later. As you've said, and a platform like Windows is only as good as the programs that run on it. And if no programs run on it, it's kind of useless. Now, how programs work today is very different than how it worked 30 years ago. Few computers today are coming with CD drives or DVD drives, and of course none have floppy drives. Many companies are moving away from the idea of installing a program on your computer at all, and instead, they want you to use their program in the cloud or from their websites and charge you by the month for the privilege. This gives them the advantage of having regular recurring revenue, which makes their stockholders and Wall Street very happy. How companies make their money is a good indication of what they plan to do in the future. To help understand my future predictions, and let's start with the past and the history of how we got to where we are today. On my screen, there we go. There we go. When IBM first approached Bill Gates for an operating system for their new desktop computers, they licensed it rather than buying it. Now, IBM, if you may not know or remember, was in the middle of a federal government antitrust lawsuit at the time, and some think that IBM thought licensing it would be a better move for them, and it would look better for them in court. The result was the software could run on computers built by IBM, yes, but any other company's machines as well. Many say this is what started the entire computer revolution. It all started with the DOS, the disk operating system. This is actually a very beloved picture for us at the Channel Islands PC Users Group. Our newsletter is called The Outer Edge. It's from this computer, the inspiration for founding of the club, because it was owned by so many of the founding members, and they wanted a support group for learning how to use this powerful new contraption. Many still love the command prompt, even to this day, and the power it wields. But for most, an easier way to compute, Windows, finally made it a must-have at business and at home. Windows 1.0 appeared in 1985, and there was an optional GUI, graphical user interface, not a complete operating system, but rather an operating environment to extend DOS. Windows 2.0 came out in 1987 and offered a runtime version and a memory manager. Windows 3.0 launched in 1990, thanks to virtual memories, it allowed users to multitask. Good old Windows 3.0. 3.1, which came in 1992, offered scalable fonts, file manager, program manager, and 3.11 included a 386 enhanced mode with an optional TCP/IP protocol for networking. Windows 95, yes. Notice the start button in the corner there. This was one that I don't know when people started using computers, but this is one of a beloved thing for many, many users. 1998. In 1998, Windows 98 finally arrived. This included a number of new technologies, included FAT32, AGP video, MMX, the USB, yay, USB ports, DVDs, and ACPI. The most visible feature, though, is the active desktop, which integrates the web browser, Internet Explorer, within the operating system. From a user's point of view, there was no difference between accessing a document residing locally on the user's hard disk and a web server halfway around the world. Then came Windows SE, or Second Edition, which many people thought of as the most beloved system up to that point. I know some people who still pine after good old Windows 98 SE. Finally, Windows ME, Millennial Edition. Not so loved, but it brought some things that we take for granted today, including universal plug and play, which makes it so much easier to plug in a printer to scanner or whatever. System Restore, automatic updates. It also included Internet Explorer 5.5, Windows Media Player 7, and the new Windows Movie Maker software, which provided basic video editing and was designed to be easy to use for home users. Bottom line so far, you have DOS-based Windows from 1985 to 2001. Now, at the same time that Microsoft was doing this for home users, they were developing additional software aimed at business. The Windows NT base started in 1993. Now, that was aimed at business and corporate users. Windows NT, or New Technology, was a 32-bit operating system that supported preemptive multitasking. Now, there were actually two versions of Windows NT. Windows NT Server, designed to act as a server on networks, and the Windows NT Workstation for standalone or for client workstations. Windows 2000 was the last version of that operating system. And that was very, very stable. It's so stable and beloved that it's still, believe it or not, used on a lot of airlines flying around the world as the in-flight entertainment system. And as I know from a couple of people who work in the US military, it's still used on US warships because of its stability. In 2001, Microsoft merged both of the codes, the Windows 9X line and the NT line, into Windows XP. Extreme Performance is what XP stood for. They had Home and Professional, but the base code was only slightly different. Microsoft tried to keep a schedule, which they promised to their investors and stockholders, of a new operating system and a new version of Office every 3 years. That schedule wasn't always met, and it resulted in the release of some software before it was ready. For example, in 2001, in May 2001, before the release of Windows XP, engineers were already working on the next version of Windows. It was codenamed Longhorn. It was to be released in 2004, 3 years after Windows XP, like on schedule, as a minor step between Windows XP and Blackcomb, which was the codename of a future Windows version. The problems and delays resulted in the release date being pushed back several times in 3 years, including dropping the WinFS file system. The company decided to skip Longhorn altogether and merge all the features they had into what would become Windows Vista. Windows Vista was released in November of 2006. Now, Microsoft said, featuring advancements in reliability, security, ease of deployment, performance, and manageability over Windows XP. New in this version are capabilities to detect hardware problems before they occur, security features to protect against the latest generation of threats, faster startup time, and low power consumption of the new sleep state. In many cases, Windows Vista is noticeably more responsive than Windows XP on identical hardware. Windows Vista simplifies and centralizes desktop configuration management, reducing the cost of keeping systems updated. That was not my experience. I'm not sure about yours, but most people I know disliked Vista because of the annoying pop-ups from the user account control all the time and the slowness in trying to run Vista on the same hardware I just had running Windows XP. In 2009, the beloved Windows 7. Microsoft said about this one, enhancements and new features in Windows 7 include multi-touch support, Internet Explorer 8, improved performance and startup time, Arrow Snap and Arrow Shake, which most people I know today don't really even know still exist in Windows 7, support for virtual hard disks, and new and improved Windows Media Center, and improved security. Many analysts just called Windows 7 a cleaned up version of Vista, or even Vista Service Pack 3. Now this is where things get interesting. 2012 is when Microsoft came out with Windows 8. Now Windows 8 was an interesting attempt to try to make an operating system work the same on phones, on tablets, and on PCs. The Windows Store and Metro-style apps were introduced to have a way to get programs onto computers and tablets with no DVD drives. It was a safety feature as well, because all the apps sold in the store would have to be approved by Microsoft. And like Apple, Microsoft would get 30% of the sale of each app. Some people say this is a clear case of Apple envy, with Apple making so much money from the iPhone and iPad, mostly due to not being able to install any software or apps on it without going through the Apple Store first and paying Apple 30% for each song, game, app, anything. Microsoft had to think that this was something they were missing out on. Unfortunately, the public didn't see the advantages of Windows 8. In my experience, most people were so confused that it was so different than the normal Windows experience they were used to, both at work and at home. A slight side note, Microsoft also was working on getting Windows on other devices. Microsoft tried to get on including, how many of you remember this? Bill Gates, the first tablet. The first tablet was not the iPad. There were tablets long before the iPad, and here's Bill Gates trying to sell his Windows on tablet in 2000. Matter of fact, there was a Windows CE version in 1996, the Pocket PC version 2000, Windows Mobile 2003, Windows Phone 2010, Windows 10 Mobile 2015 to 2017. Does anybody know anybody who still has a Windows Phone? Yeah, let's just say it wasn't a moneymaker. Windows 8 came out, 8.1 came out after that, and Windows 8.1 in 2013 had changes to the start button, and they had a desktop as the default, as opposed to that silly other screen. Anyway, with start screen. But most people still didn't like it because they still didn't want to treat their computer, their desktop computer, like a tablet. Finally, in 2015, Microsoft came out with the last version of Windows, Windows 10. They offered it as a free upgrade for current users of 7 or 8. I still can't tell you how many people who still have Vista says, can I still get a free upgrade to Windows 10? No. It's only for people with 7 or 8. And they replaced the Internet Explorer with the Edge browser. And this marked the end of the new version of Windows every 3 years. I think I have a tip for you. By the way, this is a trick for people who don't know this. Internet Explorer is not gone. If you right mouse click on your desktop and click on New and click on Shortcut, and then navigate to the Program Files x86 Internet Explorer and click on that, you'll create an icon on your desktop for the good old-fashioned Internet Explorer, and you can run that in Windows 10. Just a quick tip. The Windows Store. Okay, the reason why I brought this up. In 2017, Windows 10 S Mode arrived. Now, most of you have probably never heard of it. It's just like Windows 10, but it only runs UWP, Universal Windows Platform apps, from the Microsoft Store. Like the original Windows 8, it really focuses on security. And again, it only allows programs or apps from the Microsoft Store that should protect users from malware, viruses, ransomware, and other bad actors. But, like Windows 8, was not received well. Since the main target for this version of Windows, business and corporate clients, always seem to have their software that's proprietary just to them, and it's not in the Windows Store. Then there are web apps. But let's look at the money situation. This is numbers from 2016. Now, you got to understand that these are in the millions, which means this is the Microsoft Office is creating $23 billion in revenue in 2016. Server products, $19 billion. Xbox, $9 billion. Windows operating system, only $8 billion. That's not as much. But let's talk about this chart. This is the one I think is what is going to really be talking about the future. If you look at Microsoft's income, where they make their money, half is Office and Server and Azure. Now, Server and Azure we're going to get to in a minute, but Office and Server alone are half the company. Xbox is 11%, 9% is Windows, but again, they know they're not going to be selling Windows every 3 years, so that's going to be going down and down. Just as a quick side note, Apple is making most of their money from the iPhone, far and away. They're making a lot less from the Mac operating system. There are rumors, and this is partly where they come from, that Mac will stop making desktops and laptops in the next 5 years. I don't know if that's true, but I do know people talk to me and say, but isn't Mac the computer that people use in Hollywood to make their videos and to make their music and for that sort of thing. Well, I have to tell you, I'm now talking to you from a studio of a person who works in Southern California on video production. And they told me outright, you know, when NVIDIA comes out with a brand new video card, the 2080 that has all this processing power and RAM built into the card that's perfect for video rendering, I can't open up my Mac and put that in. They've made a closed system. They are not the leading edge. You can't get the latest processor. You can't get the latest video cards on Mac hardware. So the people that I know in the industry, they've stopped using Mac operating system years ago. And they're moved straight to PCs. Microsoft makes money, more money from Office, of course, than it does from Windows, as we just said. Since Microsoft is no longer planning to make money selling new versions of Office every 3 years to consumers, how will they make money? Well, here's a chart telling you about the timeline, about Office. Now, here's the interesting thing. In the corporate world, they're making money every 3 years, but not from when they release. It's when they end support. Every time they end support, if you're a corporation that has 100 or 1,000 desktops and they all have Office on them, when support ends and all the security things for Office are not coming to you every month, you have to pay to get a new version. And this is where they're making their money. And look at this. They're going to be keeping money going long into the future. So if you're a stockholder, this timeline is really important for you. CEO, oh, there's another one for Mac as well, if anybody wants to know about the timeline for the Mac the Mac for Office for Mac. Yes, Satya Nadella. Congratulations, Satya. This 5 years of being the CEO of Microsoft, he is not a dumb man. He's a very smart man. I have it written in my notes here. Satya Nadella is not Bill Gates. He is not Steve Ballmer. But without the baggage of being a founder or a ground floor member of a company, he is free to lead Microsoft into the future without having to maintain a vision that's 40 years old. And in the last 5 years, since his ascendance, he's been making strategic decisions daily. For example, here's the stock price. When he became the CEO of Microsoft, to more than 3 times what it is today. That's just, he's doing good stuff. These charts tell part of the story, but Microsoft has already stated that cloud services and apps are the future. This means recurring monthly income, Office 365, and even the future of other companies' apps on the Azure platform or in virtual machines. So that's why we come to Edge. The Edge rendering engine moving to Chromium. This is where this comes in. When you can run the programs you really want to run in a browser, who cares what the operating system is? Windows 10, Apple OS, Linux, Chromebook, it's all the same if you're on a browser. So, you don't think you could ever get used to a world that doesn't have your programs loaded on your machine? Well, do you ever use Spotify, Audacity, QuickBooks Online? How about Netflix? We're already getting used to a world where the OS, the operating system, doesn't matter as long as you get on the internet. Microsoft just couldn't get people to use the Edge browser at all. Some stats I've heard show that the main use of the Edge browser was once on a new computer so people could download the Chrome browser. With Microsoft changing the rendering engine of Edge with the Chrome rendering engine, this could be a meaning that Edge browser could actually come down to Windows 7 and Windows 8.1. They can even move the Edge browser to Mac or even the Linux. Now, what good is the best browser in the world if no one uses it? Extensions are what attract people to other browsers. Edge has dozens of extensions. Yes, Chrome has thousands. The updates to Edge, here's the other thing, security-wise and feature-wise, only now come twice a year when the entire OS of Windows gets updated in April and usually, and in September, October usually. Now that's going to be uncoupled from the OS, and so the browser can now be updated as often as Firefox or Chrome, which is every 6 weeks. If all browsers have the same rendering engine, we'll no longer see statements on websites you go to that says, this site best viewed in Internet Explorer. Well, that's going to be a good thing, I think, for consumers. Now, here's some terms to look at as we go to the future and as I wind down, because once we get into the future, this is all guesses. I can't show you pictures of what doesn't exist yet, but terms to look forward to are PWA, Progressive Web Apps. There's something called Windows Lite. There's containers or VMs, virtual machines to run old x86 apps. There's Project Polaris. There's Windows Core OS. For more than a year, we've been hearing about the Windows Core OS and how it's a modern version of Windows. As Microsoft continues to build out the platform, it's time to take a look at what is the secret project that they're doing and what does it include and how is the company positioning the platform? In Microsoft's feverish attempts to shove out the insider builds at an impressive rate, the company doesn't always do a great job at scrubbing the finer details of the builds. And because of this, some help can be given to us from insiders. This is a version, this is actually in the SDK. This is the new version of Windows 10 that actually is showing something called Product Lite. Now, what is Product Lite? It probably is going to be their version of something that's going to be targeting Chromebooks. They see Chromebooks as competitors to the Windows operating system, which a Chromebook, if those of you who don't know, it's just a browser. It looks like a laptop. You open it up, it feels like a laptop, but all it is a Chromebook is the Chrome browser. You're on the internet, anywhere you can go to. If you want to use a word processor, you go to your docs.google.com, and there is your you can do anything you want there with your Word document, word processing. Now, also, if you go to office.com, sign in with your Hotmail account or your Outlook.com account, you can use a version of Microsoft Word in the browser, in the cloud. We can confirm that in the latest SDK, this is what's coming. There's also something, here you go. This is called Windows Lite. Now, Windows Lite is a lot like Windows 10S and Windows RT. Again, that was for different, instead of being the Intel architecture, the RT, I believe, was on the ARM architecture, but that's a hardware thing. Again, only running PWAs and UWPs, Progressive Web Apps, and Universal Windows Programs apps. It strips out everything else. Finally, it's a lightweight version, but again, it's only going to run things that are in the store, the Windows Store. It's going to be very interesting. It's not a version of the OS that will run in the enterprise or even small business environments. I don't think you're going to be able to even buy this operating system. It's only going to come on hardware that's sold specifically for certain tasks. As a developer, you're not going to be developing for an OS anymore in the future. You're going to be developing for a browser. Moving to the Chrome rendering engine, that's going to work. Now, there's rumors that the Windows Core OS will run 32 apps, Win32 apps in a container or a VM or remotely from a server or maybe Azure. Some of these things we don't know. Developer previews for 2019 have resulted in some information leakage, and as developers work out to build apps, we may learn more as what's going to happen in the future. What about Microsoft 365 for consumers? Microsoft 365 is supposed to be a version of Office 365 plus a version of Windows, but it's mostly designed and aimed at corporations right now. Again, there's many things we don't know about the future, but all we know is it's going to be interesting. Does anybody have pictures or questions, of me now? Wow, that was fast.
Yeah, I was just trying to do it. Somebody popped it up in a different window. If you do have questions for Michael, we can entertain a bunch of them. Just go down to your chat box, not the Q&A, the chat box, and put them in, and I'll share them. Somebody made a comment that every Windows 10 update introduces so many new features and changes so many existing features. Seniors are confused and can't keep up with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I spend most of my life working with seniors, and The one thing I tell seniors over and over again is if you're used to having icons on your desktop, just stay with the icons on the desktop. Don't get confused by the start menu. And the biggest thing I tell seniors is find yourself a user group. Find yourself a users group where you can actually ask questions of other people. In my experience, members of user groups happen to be your age. We don't have a lot of people under 30 coming to our computer club. And so it's kind of fun having people who answer you in the language you speak.
Yeah, that's very true. Since you made a comment about the Apple desktop going out, what is your thoughts on the Windows desktop going out and everything going towards tablet or something like the
people have been asking me that for years, and my question is this. If you walk into an office where there's a secretary and a boss in the back room, I can't see a secretary writing letters on a tablet. She's going to have a keyboard. If you're going to be writing, proposals for insurance, you're going to want a keyboard. There are certain things you're always going to want a keyboard for. And so tablets, I really don't think they're nice, they're helpful. And if you're doing things like, warehouse people who all they have to do is check a box on a form, great, they're great for that. But as far as getting real work done, I don't know anybody who's an author or somebody who writes things that are multi-page things that are going to want to do it on a piece of glass or a tablet. So from that standpoint, I really don't think that desktops are going away. The other reason I can put my 2 cents in here is I make my living repairing them. There's no slowdown of them coming in. When people have a broken desktop computer, they want it fixed. They may go to a laptop, but nobody that's ever come to me saying, don't bother fixing this, I'm going to a tablet instead. No. People who are coming to me to get their computers fixed still want them fixed because that's the way they're used to doing things.
Yeah, well, and part of the problem is that on a tablet, when you get the keyboard, unless you attach a keyboard, you lose part of your screen when you're
Yes.
I have that problem on a smartphone doing that.
And if you have a separate keyboard, of course, you're going to lose it. I mean, if it's in a backpack or something, the connection's going to get lost. You're going to have to lose batteries on it. It's going to be much more inconvenient.
Well, talking about connection, what about the fact that all of this new stuff that's going to be browser-based and everything, that's going to require good internet connection, and not everybody has good internet connection.
Absolutely, which is why this is going to be a very interesting thing going forward, that it is a lot of these decisions that are being made by Microsoft, by major corporations, all of the major corporations, including Google, including Facebook, including Apple, all of them depend on good internet connection. You're right. I mean, they are leaving behind a lot of the country that still is on dial-up or even, very little internet connection. However, that's not where they make their money. So they're not thinking about those people. It's sad, but I can't make them think about people that's not paying them money.
Oh, exactly. I had a class where I had somebody who said, we live out in the country, we are 1 block away from the telecommunications, and they won't run
exactly.
line over, and we're 1 block the other way from the cable company, and they won't come this way. So they were left to cell service, which is expensive.
You betcha. Oh yeah. Well, people ask me also about satellite internet. In my experience, it is great if you're downloading something. You start to download, it downloads really fast. But satellites were never designed to receive information. They were designed to push information like TV. And so it still is like dial-up speed going up, really painful. But if you want something, and you can get on it and ask for it, then it comes down pretty fast. But it's certainly not. It is irregular that way, where the up speed and down speed are totally different.
Somebody commented that for Windows 10, they remembered hearing that installing it included the agreement in small print that allowed Microsoft to have access and view any files on one of its computers. Is that true?
I don't know about that. That's one thing I don't know about. The one thing that people have talked about is telemetry. Telemetry is that they can look at if something crashes, why it crashed. There's a lot of things, and that's one of the reasons why someone was talking about the released secret the way we know people are using Edge only to open up a browser to go to Chrome and download it was that telemetry data. So that's what they were finding, and somebody within Microsoft kind of released that. I mean, that's the rumor, is they're the ones who released it from the telemetry data. That's how they know that that's how the Edge browser was being used, just to download Chrome. Mm-hmm. And but it's you know, for those who want Internet Explorer, it's still there. Like I showed you, you can still use it.
Yeah, I wonder for how long though.
Exactly. That's going to be, and I think it's going to be. I'm going to be really thrilled to never see that picture on a website. This website is best viewed in Internet Explorer. I'd love to see that coming soon.
Do you think that the and these are questions? Do you think that the model of the paid subscription for Office might not drive more people to something like, you know, the OpenOffice LibreOffice or the Google Web app?
Actually, believe it or not, I think it's going to drive them sort of, yes. And then here's why I say sort of yes. LibreOffice, of course, is great and people love it, but it's not exactly the same. If you're talking about the seniors, like the people I work with every day, it's different than what they're used to. And even though I show them LibreOffice, it's like, but that's not what it looks like in Microsoft Word. It's like, okay, you have a Hotmail account. You know, a lot of these people, yeah, of course they did. They had one for 20 years. Okay, go to office.com, sign in with your Hotmail account. There's a version of Microsoft Word for free. Absolutely. Now, it's not available offline. You have to be on the internet to get it. But there's your free version of Word, free version of Excel, free version of PowerPoint. It doesn't have everything across the top, but how many people really use all the tools in the toolbar right now? Mostly they just want to change a font. They want to, you know, the size and shape, color maybe, add pictures. They don't, most of those things. I mean, I know people who are still using Microsoft Word 97 and are happy with it. It's just does everything I want. So why bother going to the new one? But then that's a very, very interesting way to talk about it too, because there was some rumor that Microsoft would not release Office 2019 as a standalone. They were only going to go with Office 365. And it's actually, they're saying, no, we really still will offer Office 2019 as you buy it, it's yours. Now remember, that's one computer. You're buying one computer for this price for Office 2019. If you go Office 365, yes, you're paying this much per year, but it's 5 different people. I think it's 6 different people, and 1 terabyte of storage in the OneDrive. So there's some advantages if you are using it on more than one machine, or if you're using it for more than one person to going to Office 365. But again, I know the old timers, they want to own it, and that's it.
Yeah, it's mine. What is the feelings of Microsoft in not allowing users to just do security updates and not allow all that extra apps and changes and stuff to go on?
Are you talking about the end of Windows 7?
No, you know, like with 10, you know.
Oh yes,
have to take whatever they do.
Yes,
you know,
yes. Well, here's what I explain it as, and I've explained this several times to other people, but if you try to think about it, again, from a stockholder's standpoint or a corporate standpoint, you have a team of people who are standing by to be the support for Windows 7. You have a team of people standing by to be the support for Windows 8. You have a team of people standing by to be the support of Windows 10. You know, we save a lot of money by firing some of these people and getting everybody on the same thing. And that's, if you think about it from their standpoint, that makes perfect sense. If you call up for support, now nobody that I know of really does try to call Microsoft for support, but a lot of corporate clients do. And if they only have to have one team of people that says, okay, you're on Windows 10, therefore I know exactly what to tell you. I don't have to go through my book and through pages and pages to say, oh, you're on this version of Vista with this service pack, and so your answer is going to be that. They don't have to worry about that. So from their standpoint, I think it makes sense. From the user standpoint, there's nothing wrong with my Windows 7. Why do I have to get rid of it? Well, again, you don't have to get rid of it in January of 2020 when they end all support. Now, when they say end all support, kind of like Windows XP, that doesn't mean it won't work.
Right.
It just means if bad guys find a hole, they're not interested in fixing it. There is something I just heard about just yesterday that is the rumored, actually it's now been released. If you are in the channel, which means you're running enterprise software, which is a volume license agreement, which is nobody probably listening right now, you can pay $50 a year for more Windows 7 security supports every month. But that's going to go away in 3 years. And so that's only for volume license partners. It's a long thing. So they will be supporting it, but you know, it's time. It's been around for more than 10 years. And again, the normal life cycle, like I said, it was 3 years. They were supposed to come out with a new version of Windows. Part thing that I didn't say is that after the 10th year, all support ends for that version of Windows 95 or Windows 98 or Windows XP. XP, they went longer because Vista was a problem, and they were just, people were yelling so much, no, we love our XP.
Yeah.
And where it gets interesting is when you have embedded systems like in the hospitals in England that got hit with ransomware, and because their MRI machine was running a version of Windows XP. Well, an MRI machine is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're not going to upgrade it just because it's out of date. It does an MRI. What do we care what operating system it is? And that's the problem. That's the problem we're going to find with Windows 7 going in the future as well.
Well, here, just relating to Windows 10,
Yes.
In our group, we periodically will have a program that says, here's Windows 10 fall update, spring
Yes.
update. Here
Yes.
are the changes and the additions.
Yes.
And we go over those, and at the end of the meeting, most of the people in the club
Exactly.
says, yeah, they say, that I'm not interested in that. I'm not
Yeah.
interested in that.
Right. Don't care. Yeah.
So,
And
why can't we?
That's exactly, which is why I think what I was talking about is, and in the future, you may get a Windows Lite where we're all going to have just, it runs a couple of things, but mostly it's a browser. And it's really what it's going to be. And yes, that may be exactly what happens in the future. That's very, very true. And if you want something fancy, you can have a virtual machine on the Azure, or heaven forbid, even the AWS, which is the Amazon Web Services, where you can run a program on their cloud, and all you need is a browser to get there, and you can run your fancy program there. Yep, that's true. I mean, some of this has to do with Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop on your phone. You're talking about getting rid of computers and only going to tablets and phones. Well, you still got to edit your photos. And Adobe is making it possible for you to actually run this really full-featured $400, $700 program on your phone. Now, are you willing to pay $700 for an app for your phone? Most people aren't, but if that's what you're going to be editing your photo with, then you would. Mm-hmm. But again, like you say, I can't imagine professional photographers getting rid of their computers anytime soon. So I hear that a lot, where people saying, I heard it said that they're saying they're going to be no computers in the future. No, there really will be. There may not be as many, true, but there's always going to be some. Hey, I know people who still own typewriters. So, there's going to be people who have them. But if you have the right tool for the right job, that's crucial.
Major updates to Windows 10 seems to reset all the settings to defaults.
Yeah, they do.
Is there a way to at least record all the setting changes in privacy that can make it better so you can fill it back in again real quick?
Nah, I don't know of a sneaky way to do that, really. I don't. Now, here's one of the reasons why I know this. One of the things that I do for my clients, and we've taught it at our computer club, is Windows 7 games. If you like your Spider Solitaire and you like your Windows 7 Spider Solitaire, every time there's a new Windows update, it wipes it out. There is a way to download it, and what you got to do is keep that file in your downloads folder. And next time there's a Windows update and you realize my Spider Solitaire is gone, you just reinstall it. And because it's just, yes, it's part of what Microsoft does. And the reason why, if you don't know this, the reason why they took the Windows 7 games out of Windows 10 is they wanted to take everybody to go to the Windows Store, because that's where you're supposed to get your games from, and that's what you're supposed to get your programs from. And no, I like my old Hearts, I like my old Solitaire. I don't want to have the Windows Store version of Solitaire and free cell. I want my version that I'm used to. And it's like, yes, there are some ways to still get that.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the policy that you don't own Windows 10, you lease it, so it's their product and it's produced the way they want it. And if they want to reset it, that's what they can do.
Well, in one sense, there is a way around that. However, you got to take it off the internet. And so what good is it if you take it off? Yeah. It'll never update if you never get, oh, here's another one. How many of you have ever bought, or people who bought those really cheap $199 Windows laptops? Whatever you do, don't. because what they did was they soldered a chip inside the computer, which is like only 32 gigs. It's a really, really, really tiny hard drive, which means it'll never get updates. There's no room. The things, and there's no way to, to get it bigger. I can't replace it. It's soldered onto the motherboard. You bought a really cheap laptop that had a 90-day warranty. Guess what? You've had it a year. You're supposed to throw it away now. And that's the problem with certain, I deal with this every day. And it's one of those things that I can't explain to people. Well, what do you mean I can't fix it? Because it was built to only last 90 days. That's the thing.
Now, I do know that if you have a motherboard that doesn't do virtualization, if you've got a lower end motherboard, you might have a little problem. But yeah, well, we'll say give it a try. And
but again, the biggest question I have is why is he running it? Because this is where what you're running and how you're running it can help determine, you're doing something that's different than most people. And so, you can run into all kinds of problems and complications. A lot of people are running virtual boxes or virtual machines because they want to run old DOS programs. And for that, I go to DOSBox. And DOSBox runs great. DOSBox. But it really depends on exactly what he's running. This is my favorite. I use this all the time. So I have an old, matter of fact, in the introduction when you were explaining to me about introducing me about what programs I was using when I started with computers in the 80s. One of them I can still use today, and I use it in DOSBox. And there's even a way to use it and print to your printer. So that's fabulous. And I've run that on Home, Pro, all kinds of hardware, because you're basically running DOS. That's what you're running. And that's great. That still runs. But again, it really depends on the questioner why they want to virtualize.
Yeah.
And so that's true.